All right, let's get into the Thursday night. Well, not Thursday. I shouldn't say night. The Thursday Thanksgiving DFS slate. We
All
got
day
the
long, baby. All day long.
we got the Bills at the Lions, starting it off early in the morning on the West Coast, afternoon on the East Coast. Then we got the Giants and the Cowboys after that, and the nightcap is the Patriots going to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. So that's some pretty interesting games to choose from. This Bills and Lions game has a total of 54 and a half as we record this on Tuesday, and the line is Bills by 9.5. So expecting the Bills to put up a big number, but there could be all kinds of fantasy goodness in this one. So let's go position by position, starting with quarterback. Who do you like for this slate?
I just got to go with the top dog here with Josh Allen against the Lions. He could have a massive game here. It's going to be indoors, and the Lions have allowed the most completions, 20 plus yards downfield. So, and the Lions run defense has been pretty good lately. They slowed down the Packers rushing offense with both AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones, not really getting going against them. And then Saquon Barkley last week got balled up. So I just think it makes sense to go top heavy at quarterback. I think you go with Kirk Cousins is kind of cheap as well, but I think stacking Josh Allen with Diggs, Gabe Davis, Dawson, Knox makes the most sense. And then there's a ton of under the radar value at other positions. So I'll be contrarian and find lower rostered guys at the other positions, but at QB, I think you got to go Josh Allen here.
So love Josh Allen, obviously my highest projected quarterback of the week and highest projected quarterback on this slate by 10 points in my model over Dak Prescott. I have Allen at 27.2 and Prescott at 17.7. So almost 10, like 9.5. But you get the point. Massive gap between the two. But I will say this. These are the kind of slates. There's 3 games. So you got to make sure to think through all of the different possibilities, because you don't want to be right and still be wrong. And what I mean by that is we all love the Bills offense indoors against this Lions defense that, well, they have shown improvement. I think, Kirby Joseph and some guys, Aiden Hutchinson, obviously making a difference. Still a defense that should give up points to Buffalo. So if we're right about that, how can we take advantage on a 3-game slate? I think the quarterback you need to roster is Jared Goff, because if the Bills put up what Vegas thinks they're going to put up, I mean, they're 9-point favorites with a total of 54.5. So what's that? Let's see, about 32 implied, about 30 to 35 points is what the odds makers are expecting. And I'm pretty much in line with that. I think the Bills can put up a big number here. Then we got the home Lions. This home Lions team, they're always in the game, and they put up massive point totals, kind of in shootouts when they're at home. On the road, it doesn't always work out like that. But you remember in week 1 against Philadelphia, 38-35, the Eagles won. Week 2 at home for the Lions, 36-27 over the Commanders. Week 4, the Seahawks put up 45. The Lions put up 45 at home. The Seahawks put up 48. Shootout. 31-27 Dolphins in Detroit in week 8. And then the only aberration was that Packer game. But remember, Aaron Rodgers threw a bunch of picks at the goal line. If he connects on those, that likely ends up in a shootout as well. So I think that Goff, he's kind of been able to just hand it off to Williams, our boy, and, Justin Jackson getting involved. But this is a game where they might need Jared Goff to score 30 to 35 points, which means he's going to have to put it in the air. And you have that correlation between a quarterback that's double-digit points better than any other quarterback. But now with Goff, you have that correlation. So that's my kind of under-the-radar play in this slate if you're not going to pay up for Josh Allen.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And, teams that use Jared Goff are going to have a ton of money to spend. So I think a lot of teams that have Goff they're going to be able to afford Diggs and Jefferson. So I think you're going to see overlap with teams that take Goff. So I think if you go the Goff route, you have to be comfortable leaving what, like a K left over. But that's definitely a situation where you want to try to still be unique if you use Goff, because a lot of people are going to be able to. There's not that many like blue chip players on this slate. So even if you take Goff, I think you're still going to have to be somewhat contrarian with the rest of your team.
Absolutely. I mean, you have a lot of stacking options to be contrarian on the Lions, because we just talked about it. It's been mostly the Amon-Ra St. Brown show. But if you're expecting Goff to play from behind, maybe has to throw for 300 yards, it's going to be somebody besides St. Brown. Maybe it's just one of the tight ends gets a touchdown. Maybe Khalif Raymond pops a big play. Maybe, Chark is healthier this week. But there are a lot of contrarian options, which is another reason, a lot of contrarian options on the Lions, which is another reason why I do like Goff. Let's jump to running back. Who do you like?
Yeah, so if you do go with Goff, I think like going with like DeAndre Swift or even Justin Jackson would be sneaky as well. But for running back, I think the obvious play is Ramondre Stevenson. He is way too cheap. And last week Damian Harris started, but Stevenson was really the workhorse back from the second drive and on. Plus he's game script proof. So if they end up in a trailing game script at Minnesota, which could happen, he could have a big game. I'm projecting him for 4.5 receptions here. Plus the Vikings are a zone heavy team. So it's just a great matchup for Stevenson. Digging a little bit deeper, I think James Cook is a great play. He's coming off the best game of his career, going for 86 yards on 11 carries. He was seeing a lot more playing time in neutral situations, but if this is a game where, the Bills could easily blow out the Lions, Cook's going to be the lead back later in the game as well. So he's definitely a good leverage play against, Josh Allen team. So I think if you're going with a Jared Goff lineup, I think James Cook makes a lot of sense too to correlate with that. So I think Cook is probably the sneaky play, and he's super cheap on DK right now.
Yeah, he's been coming on. I mean, they've been looking for that complement to Singletary. And I think a lot of people assumed that's why they traded for Nyheim Hines. No, they traded for Nyheim Hines so that he can handle punt returns and do a lot of, be the guy that touches the ball in key situations, because Isaiah McKenzie, he's had his issues as a receiver and as a returner. So they wanted to upgrade at that spot. And that's why you haven't seen Hines really factor into the rotation. I think Cook is going to be that guy that maybe, they different kind of player, but, they wanted Zach Moss to be that complement to Devin Singletary. So, they wouldn't have to rely on Singletary down the stretch like they've had to these last couple of years as they're making that Super Bowl run. So, I think you continue to see Cook emerge, and always like the young guys on, the short rests.
Yep.
So love that call. You mentioned a guy that I'll go to as a dart throw, and that is Justin Jackson. I think Jackson is very interesting because there is a number of different outs with Jackson. For one, he's been factoring into the regular running backfield rotation for this Lions team. Jamal Williams has been getting about 60% of the carries, but then Swift really is only playing, 20-ish% of the snaps, and Jackson is picking up the rest. And Jackson, his route participation rate was just as high as Swift's these last 2 weeks, right in the mid-30s. And Jamal Williams, we talked about this. He doesn't really go out in many routes. He's going to be the early down grinder, which the Lions have had a chance, to do because they've been in a lot of positive game script. But if the Lions have to now go into hurry up mode, you're not only going to see DeAndre Swift, especially on a short rest. So Justin Jackson, I think, could easily see, 30 to 40% of the snaps in this game. And you also have the out where if indeed the Bills do end up blowing out the Lions, well, Jackson is the third string back on a short week. So Jackson could conceivably get, let's say it's kind of a result like the Cowboys-Vikings last week. Jackson could get, a lot of the third and most of the fourth quarter and catch a lot of screen passes, easy, dump offs against prevent defense, things like that. And, if they're close, they still rotate Jackson in. He'll still show up in the red zone now and then. So I just think there's a lot of different ways for Justin Jackson to score in this game. And I don't think many people are going to be on him, the way they should, just because there's so many other guys like a James Cook that feel smart, that I don't think like Jackson is going to be the chalk, I guess you could say.
Yeah, no, that's a great call. And a 3-game slate, he doesn't need like a massive game to really be in the winning lineup. Just last week's game alone would probably be enough. He had 66 rushing yards, a catch for 11 yards. Obviously, we'd want more than that, but on a slate like this, he doesn't need that much volume. And yeah, this is a game flow that could favor him. It might be not a great week to play Jamal Williams. But yeah, I like Justin Jackson. I think he's like he's the same price as CJ Ham. So there you go. He's super cheap.
Absolutely. So yeah. And one other guy I mentioned, because I just love him. I don't think you worry about Zeke here. I think you pay for Pollard in this spot. I mean, this guy is just running so well, and the Giants are allowing 5.3 yards per carry to opposing halfbacks. So like, this is the matchup of matchups for a guy like Pollard, who just rips off chunk gain after chunk gain. So I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, man, Zeke's going to kind of be splitting the carries. Maybe Zeke gets a goal line carry. Tony Pollard doesn't need the goal line to score touchdowns, as we saw last week. So I think that and Tony Pollard's a guy who, if the Giants play man coverage, Tony Pollard's not really a guy who's going to pick up a lot of blitzes. He's not a great pass blocker. So he may still be in the route, and they may use one of the tight ends to actually pick that up. Remember, they're also going with a lot more 1-2 personnel. So they could have a guy like Ferguson, Hendershot, maybe even Dalton Schultz pick that up and get Pollard isolated on those weak Giants linebackers in man coverage. Oh man, it's just such a juicy matchup for him. All right, let's jump to what's always the key position in fantasy DFS, and that's wide receiver. You mentioned the studs at the top. Justin Jefferson is the highest priced receiver on DraftKings, followed by Stephon Diggs. Jefferson's 8.2K, Diggs is 8K, CeeDee Lamb next at 7,100, and Amon-Ra at 6,600. Those are the top four. Then there's a big drop off. Who do you like?
I'm going to go with the guy that's that big drop off. The number 5 receiver is Gabe Davis. He's 5,300, but this is a potential eruption spot against the Lions. Like I said, the Lions defense has allowed the most receptions, 20 plus yards downfield. So this could be a big Gabe Davis week and spot for him. Going a little bit farther down the list, I like Nelson Aguilar at 3,100 against the Vikings here. He's just a sneaky play because his rostership will probably be extremely low, probably 3% or less here. But last week he operated as the number 2 wide receiver. He had a 64% routes run rate. And weeks 1 through 4, when he was averaging around 70% routes run rate, he was a top 50 wide receiver. He was wide receiver 47 in PPR. So, the Pats could get into a trailing pass heavy game script here, and we could see Aguilar have his standard, 2 to 3 big games a season. It could be here on a 3-game slate. So I like Aguilar just based on his opportunity and his price, and his rostership will be low. So I think he's one of my favorite cheaper options on the slate.
Yeah, I saw that he ran the, outside of Jacoby Myers, who was in the 90s, Aguilar was number 2, and they kind of split everything up after Aguilar pretty equally, but Aguilar was on the field about 2/3 of the time. Now, we don't know if that will continue because it's the Patriots, but like you said, I don't think a lot of people are going to be on him to begin with. So you don't really have anything to lose by taking a shot on the guy that was the Patriots' number 2 wide receiver a week ago.
Yeah, and Parker, they eased Parker in last week, but this is a short week. So I'm not expecting Parker's workload to take a massive leap here. But it was just notable that Aguilar, he pushed down Kendrick Bourne, the rookie Tyquan Thornton, down the pecking order a bit. So they're trying to get Aguilar going. So on a short week, I don't know if they're going to be able to make too many changes. So I do expect them to be, number 2 behind Myers this week again.
Yeah. Anyone else there?
Well, Noah Brown, I think he sticks out at 3,500, and Richie James especially, now that Wan'Dale Robinson is out for the season, but it looks like Richie James himself is on the injury report, so that's something to monitor. Looks like he's dealing with a knee injury, but if James does suit up, at 3,400, we've seen him sort of fill in, snap for snap what Wan'Dale Robinson role was, so he could be sneaky on this 3-game slate as well.
Yeah, speaking of sneaky, I'm going to go all the way to min price and go with Isaiah Hodgins for the Giants, because he was essentially operating as a top 3 receiver, the second perimeter receiver alongside Slayton. He overtook Kenny Galladay and Marcus Johnson after being signed off the Bills practice squad a couple of weeks ago. And remember, Dayball comes from the Bills, so Hodgins knew the offense already, which is why he was able to immediately slot in. And they've been looking for somebody. Remember, Daniel Jones is barking at Marcus Johnson for dropping that touchdown. And Galladay, every time he gets a target, it's a drop. So Hodgins has been that second outside receiver. And yes, Richie James will be the slot receiver, but Hodgins ran a route 65% of the time 2 weeks ago, 56% last week, operating as that, number 3 receiver on the Giants. And with Wan'Dale Robinson, a guy who we saw is capable of a 100-yard game and a bunch of catches, with him out of the lineup, there is going to be some target redistribution here. We talked about on the other pod, maybe Saquon Barkley sees some of it, but realistically, this is the Giants. There's going to be guys who you've never heard of that'll probably get a target or two in this game. So I think it's really smart to go with Hodgins, a guy who, he seems new, but he's already kind of been installed there, and he already knew the offense. And he showed pretty good chemistry, with Daniel Jones. I know he had a fumble last week, but, they like him. I think they're going to continue to play him. And he's got 5 catches for 70 yards already in those 2 games, just kind of walking in off the street, essentially off the Bills practice squad into a starting role for this Giant team.
Yeah, I like that call. And he is literally min price at $3K on DraftKings.
Yeah. So, people might not scroll down long enough to even find him there. So really like him. And, in terms of the guys, at the higher end, I think Jacoby Myers is always overlooked. He's a guy who, this is going to be a completely different kind of game than we had with the Patriots and the Jets last week, where they didn't score an offensive touchdown. This week, the Patriots defense will have some success against the Vikings offense, but I do think you'll see more points from both of these teams than we saw a week ago. And I think people might have a bad taste in their mouth. The Vikings did nothing against the Cowboys. The Patriots offense did nothing against the Jets. They just got the punt return. But, Myers here, he would line up in the slot. The Vikings still, they got Chandon Sullivan there. They play a lot of zone coverage. So shouldn't be a situation where Myers is, going to get into any kind of matchup that's going to be tough for him to beat. And this Viking team, they're still 8-2. So if the Patriots fall behind, you could see one of those 8, 9, 10 catch games from Jacoby Myers. And we saw Mac Jones post an efficient 23 of 27 game last week, and he could do something similar this week, except a lot of those catches could end up going to Myers. So I really like him as a guy who can put up he could put up an Amon-Ra type of game. He can put up a CeeDee Lamb type of stat line, but he's going to be a little overlooked, and he's cheaper. Just 100 more than Slayton.
Yeah, and he'll be able to avoid Patrick Peterson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge when you're facing the Vikings.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. Myers, one of those, number 1 receivers who spends most of his time in the slot. So, yeah, he'll play a couple of perimeter snaps here and there, but this is the Patriots they're talking about. They're going to get him matched up. He's their best receiver. They're going to get him matched up on who they want him to be matched up on. So, like him in that middle tier. Let's go to tight end now. Who do you like at that position?
So, pound for pound, Dawson Knox is certainly the best option at 3,500. And, he ran a season high 83% routes rate last week. Also saw a season high 7 targets. This is a great spot for him. So, like I said, stacking him with Josh Allen, Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs makes a ton of sense. However, I think there is a sneaky tight end on the slate. Lawrence Cager. He's 2,700. Yeah, I never thought I would be able to recommend this guy, but here we are. He's a former wide receiver, converted tight end.
Yep.
And last week he ran around on 71% of dropbacks. Only, went for 2 catches for 20 yards. But with that kind of opportunity, especially with Wan'Dale Robinson out for the season, he could see an extra couple of targets this week. So as long as Daniel Bellinger is out, which looks to be the case this week, Cager is the Giants' lead tight end. So on a slate like this, especially, a tougher matchup against Cowboys, he could have a good game. And again, he's only 2,700 on a slate like this. I don't think his rostership is going to be over, 5%. So he's the type of play that could be the key to unlocking this slate.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think we talked about him on the pod last week. He didn't end up hitting, but I think he was the guy mentioned for the main slate for that exact reason. You know, he was kind of operating as that starting tight end. The Giants, you just gotta on a short slate, on these small slates, you always got to be mindful that this team, they just kind of plug guys in, and that's what it is. So, you know, Bellinger out, they're going with KJ because they like him over Tanner Hudson, and Myrick is the blocking tight end. So I like that call. For me, I like Rock Wright as a dart throw. Again, you know, this Lion team, I think a lot of people, you know, we know Buffalo is good against the tight end, but if you watched that game last week, Harrison Bryant and Farrell Brown each had wide open touchdowns that they dropped. So, and we, you know, this is a game where we already talked about, if it gets away from the Lions, it could be a completely different game script. Instead of Jamal Williams getting all the touchdowns, you may see the tight ends. You may see, you're going to see Amon-Ra, but you may also see the starting tight end end up getting an easy one. So, like Brock Wright, who is, you know, leading that team in tight end snaps, because Hawkinson, he's on the slate too, is now a member of the Vikings. So I think on anytime you're talking about a big trailing game script, you know, the starting tight end is always the guy you want, because they're not going to go with heavy personnel with 1-2 for too long when they're trailing big. But usually they'll keep that starting tight end, and he'll just kind of sit down in the zones, and you could get a boatload of catches sometimes from that. So I'll go Brock right here.